Farmers on the northern shore of Lubang Island in the Philippines are running for their lives. In this serene setting, they've glimpsed a terrifying sight emerge from the jungle. Now coming towards them through the fields are two Japanese men in tattered military uniforms, firing shots into the air. These men are something from another time. Second Lieutenant Hiroo Onoda and Private First Class Kinshichi Kazuka of the Imperial Japanese Army. Frightened though the farmers are, they have become somewhat used to this bizarre and dangerous situation. If Onoda and Kazuka look like something from another era, that's because they are. The pair have been on the island nearly 3 decades, and believe it or not, I think the Second World War is still going on. One farmer fetches the police. As the authorities approach Onoda and Kazuka, they are busy taking whatever supplies they can get their hands on. There used to be a group of 4. Private Yuichi Akatsu didn't have the staying power of the other men and deserted in 1949, and Shoichi Shimada had been shot in 1954. The fatal mistake the Japanese soldiers make is to try and burn one more pile of rice. As the food goes up in flames, it gives the police just the time they need to close in. A gun battle breaks out. Kazuka is struck in the shoulder. Thinking his comrade and friend is dead, Onoda slips back into the forest. The police give chase, but Onoda mounts into the forest like a ghost. This game of cat and mouse has been going on since 1945 on this tiny island of just 45 square miles. On February the 28th, 1945, the Americans started the recapture of Lubang. Initially, ships fired barrages while the planes bombed the Japanese positions. Left behind by the retreating Japanese forces, Onoda was to head up a cell that would continue to fight a guerrilla war. His commanding officer, Major Taniguchi, had ordered him in 1945 to never surrender. Forbidding those Japanese left behind to die by their own hand, they were to continue the struggle against the enemy until the victorious Imperial Japanese Army returned. Unfortunately for Onoda and his men, Taniguchi himself surrendered shortly afterwards. Onoda's only option was to retreat into the mountains, where the men were on constant alert for survival and for the opportunity to create mayhem. As the war ended, B-17s dropped leaflets to convince the holdout soldiers to surrender. The leaflets contained an order from General Yamashita, give themselves up and surrender. But orders dropped from American planes? It must be subterfuge, an American trick to fool the Emperor's loyal soldiers. Onoda and his men lived a tough life, maintaining military discipline day in, day out. Always on the move, they lived in temporary huts made of bamboo, and mainly survived on such treats as boiled bananas. The men were able to supplement their diet by stealing from the natives of Lubang, occasionally shooting a cow and drying the meat. Every year, the men went through a ceremony, bowing in the direction of the emperor's palace and reaffirming their commitment to continue to follow their orders and continue to fight the war. Though, with the passing of time, through death, injury, or desertion, Onoda is finally on his own. The most dedicated of all the men deals with this challenge like every other, dogged determination to follow his orders, conserving ammunition and still taking the battle to the enemy. Of course, all the locals were American spies and deserved to be attacked, didn't they? The locals were terrorized. Many died at the hands of Onoda and his men, and many attempts were made to convince him to surrender. Onoda has received excellent intelligence training, but they've trained him too well, leaving him to see everything as propaganda and consider all strangers his enemy. Leaflets are dropped, photos are displayed, personal messages are written. All of these bounce off Onoda, who treats the communications as elaborate fakes made by American spies. At one stage, his own brother, Toshio, tries to bring him out of hiding by singing a song they used to know as students. Because Toshio is upset, his voice breaks during the strange jungle-bound performance. Listening intently and hiding, Onoda takes this as proof of a trickster who isn't able to impersonate Toshio's voice properly. Eventually, the responsibility for finding Onoda rests on one man, Norio Suzuki. Suzuki is a young adventurer. As well as Onoda, he's looking to track down a panda and a yeti on his travels. It's 1974. Just 4 days into his epic search, Suzuki comes face to face with Onoda. The seasoned soldier sneaks up on the intruder, aiming his rifle. Suzuki says his prayers expecting the worst, but fortunately for him, there's one small detail that saves his life: his socks. Onoda notices the young man's inappropriate dress code of socks and rubber shoes. It's a clear sign the man is just a tourist of some kind, and so, after all these years, Onoda decides to trust him. He told this hippie boy that if he were to receive an order to surrender from a superior officer, his war would finally end. Traveling to the Philippines, Taniguchi finally gives Onoda the order to surrender in a ceremony. President Marcos pardons Onoda for the deaths of up to 50 local people and the injury of over 100 more. His military service now over, he is able to return home to Japan. The Japan of the 1970s isn't a huge surprise to the 50-year-old Onoda. He and Kazuka stole a transistor radio in the 60s where they heard all about jet planes and color television. At the time, they assumed that many of the details were invented, but now he knows the fantasy is in fact reality. He was received in Japan as a hero, particularly from the older generation. There were queues of people lining up to meet the brave soldier whose strength of character and duty caused him to keep fighting a war that had long finished. He became the center of attention and wrote a book about his story. The younger generation weren't so sure. Was he a brave soldier or a fanatic who crossed the line? A reported 30 people were killed during that post-war period, with 100 injured. Onoda himself questioned the wisdom of his own actions. He later said, "I cursed myself for just causing trouble all those years." Troubled by the attention and the fact that the philosophy of Japan had changed so much during his time in the jungle, he retreated from the public eye and moved to Brazil to be near his brother. Living a long and fruitful life, the old soldier finally passed away in just 2014 at the age of 91.